As we've been talking a little bit about putting together research and specifically thinking about the service of argumentation, it's time to really take our game up a notch and look at this pretty complex diagram called Toulmin's model of argumentation. I will have this resource along with the link in Classroom for you so you can review it. Essentially, I've given you some of these terms before, but we need to understand a little bit about where we're going, as now we kind of have this research question and we're doing some research, but we want to understand that something eventually is going to become an argument. So when we think about argument, the first thing that we think about is taking a position or a side. Um, or, I mean, the other thing you could think about is getting in a squabble with somebody that you care about. Maybe whether or not you should do the dishes every night because your parents cooked for you, something like that. When we talk about academic argument, what you really want to think about is that there are multiple positions to a complex problem, and that there is obviously a better solution out there than you've heard. That better solution can come in a variety of different shapes and sizes. So if there's a problem or if there's an area of interest, the first thing that we want to do is look for evidence. And so that's actually what you're doing right now. You're looking through to find information on your big research question. And what are you looking for? Well, you might be looking for data. Um, that's actually relatively hard for high school students to get their hands on. Data is that hard information, usually conducted out of a study. And so that's a little far removed from what you can get. Where you're probably looking is research findings. So, what have the people who have done the study, what are they giving you? That's research findings. Finally, there's what has been observed. And so, this is probably where a lot of you are actually starting your journey, is thinking about what have I seen in my life that causes me to think the way that I do. Well, surprisingly, there are other people than yourself, and there are many other experiences than yourself. So, of these three, data is the most powerful. It's raw, it's unshaped, it's conducted through a study. Research findings are the synthesizing of that data, somebody else putting together what that data means for you. And what is being observed can be pretty casual and can be actually pretty wrong sometimes. So when I think about what has been observed, I think about things like racial stereotypes. They are observations that people have made, and certainly if you were to judge everybody of a certain race by stereotypes that you've heard, you would be pretty wrong. So we start with evidence. Really important in this model. And only after we find some evidence can you develop a claim. So once you start doing this research and finding what you want to find, then you can start to put together an actual argument. A claim is based on evidence, and it's three things, three really important things. It needs to be debatable, defensible, and insight yielding. So let's talk about those three really quickly. So debatable means it has to have at least two arguable sides. If you don't have at least two sides, then you can't really have an argument. And when we say debatable, then those two sides need to be pretty clear. If we say something like terrorism is bad, there's no one who's really going to argue reasonably that terrorism is a good thing, right? So that wouldn't be a debatable topic. Defensible, it needs to have the evidence behind it to make for a defense. So you have to have found some evidence before you really take your position in something. And then insight yielding. So it needs to teach us something. It needs to be able to open our eyes, open the eyes of your potential audience, so that we actually learn something from this process. That's very important in argument. So that claim, once we have that claim, we're probably going back to our evidence and looking, do I have enough evidence? I want to make sure that the evidence that I have connects to my claim. Maybe I need to go find some more stuff. They're going to answer questions like, what makes you say so, or what do you have to go on? Those are important questions to answer in the argument that you're setting up. Okay, so that's going to lead us to warrants. So warrants are going to connect the claim and the evidence. And this, ladies and gentlemen, this is the key word for this whole project, this whole presentation. And it is the thing that most people are really, really bad at. So if you remember ACE, answer, cite, explain. What was the thing that was always missing? The explain. What's the thing that I'm always asking you to do? Give another example. Show how that connects, right? That's what warrants are. It's showing how these things connect. Warrants are a general rule or principle. So I've gathered a series of pieces of information, and in general, they all say the same thing. Or almost always, they say the same thing. That's going to be a really important phrase for us in argument. It is the reasoning or thinking about the evidence. So, imagine that you have done all this research, and it comes in the form of big, heavy books. And you walk around with these big, heavy books, and then you decide, oh, I'm going to educate a friend. I'm going to show them my research, and I'm going to show them that I'm right about this topic. And you just hand them the books. Well, the problem with handing people your evidence and not anything else other than I'm right and here's why is they could come to a very different conclusion than you have. They might not read all of that information. And so your reasoning, your thinking about it is the argument. That is the argument itself, is how you're reasoning and thinking about your evidence. People can go and fact check you all they want. If you've done your research, they're going to find that you're right. But you have to make the argument. You have to explain why you chose to use the research that you did and how that actually connects to your claim. Without warrants, there is no argument. So this is something, again, as I move into thinking about argument with students, this is the number one area where I'm kind of kicking back proposals or kicking back portions of papers. I'm just saying there's no warrant here. There's no reasoning here. And even in the outline that we make, the outline is going to be warrants. That's what we're going to do. So the outline is going to be a little more dense than you think, but less dense than a paper. Okay. And really complex arguments, we're not going to talk much about this in English 2. We would need backing. So this is an area where you're consistently arguing with people. I think about, an event like speech and debate, where if you do one portion of debate, you're going to have that same topic time after time after time. Well, if you argued with that topic and somebody beat you on a point, then you would want to change something about that point, and that's where backing comes in. So I'm going to speed through backing. If you really are interested in argument, again, I'm going to have the presentation available for you. That's the stuff that I would get into maybe with my juniors. Qualifiers. Qualifiers is a very simple concept. We all know those people that when we've been arguing with them and we say, like, this is absolutely true, they go like, well, I know this one time where it didn't happen that way. And you're like, okay, one time. So what this does is recognize that there is no such thing as an absolute. And the importance of that is to get rid of those really annoying people. So it's really useful to use words like perhaps, maybe, possibly, assuming. I think you heard me use like often earlier, or in general, or almost always. And these are really important as you kind of get into argument because there's always some outliers. In fact, outliers are a really important part of the data gathering process. Um, and so even in the best data, you're gonna have some outliers. Again, I like to use those qualifiers as I come up with my claims or as I use my warrants to kind of protect the argument from that absolute problem. The rebuttal. Rebuttal is just the awareness that anytime you argue, you're going to have an opponent, and that your opponent is probably going to come at you with these different types of arguments. Again, it's a little more sophisticated. Sometimes when we write papers, we add the rebuttal into it. I think we'll do something a little similar to that. So, just a reminder, anticipating and responding to likely counter arguments. Um, if we go back to something like, oh well, here's one that's really important. Should states open as of May 6th, 2020? Should states open for business? Um, if I say no, the likely counter argument that people are going to give me is, well, the economy is crashing and we really need some help there. Or, Joe Sixpack doesn't have a job right now and they need that to feed their family. And so we have to get over this thing. Those are really valid, very important counter arguments. Are they evidence based? Are they qualifiers? Do they have proper backing? I don't know. Those would be things that we determine inside of our argument. But I would want to acknowledge the other side is probably going to come at me from this point of view. Okay, so rebuttal, again, we'll kind of maybe use a paragraph for rebuttal as you think about these. And as you're turning your entire paper and you're shifting from that mindset of, well, I'm just going to find some stuff to, I'm going to find some stuff and then I'm going to come up with a claim. That's where we want to be moving in the next couple weeks.